Quiet on the set, please.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
And action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Hi, Nan.
Hi, Steve.
This is a really fun episode because we're going to slip into the shadows a little bit. And you know I like things in the shadows. This is where classic Hollywood glamour meets organized crime.
Yikes.
Ooh. And we're really going to explore these classic Hollywood actresses who found themselves romantically entangled with real-life mobsters. It was a time in the studio days where actresses had their images tightly controlled by the studios. And so these notorious bad boys sort of offered something intoxicatingly different for these women. They offered raw power beyond what the studio had. They offered fierce loyalty and protection from predators, both on and off the screen. And they also offered sort of a rebellious thrill that defied Hollywood's carefully scripted rules, which I think a lot of women found interesting. Mm-hmm. They were drawn by charisma and thrills and maybe even a little danger. These women navigated a world where diamonds and nightclubs and whispered threats coexisted with Hollywood premieres and press junkets and all that good stuff, and where love could be as risky as it was seductive. All the way back, I think it was episode 27 maybe, in March of 24, we talked about actress Donna Drake's involvement with gangster Louis Amberg, and it seems that she wasn't the only Hollywood actress to fall for the excitement and charms of a bad boy gangster. So this week, we're going to look at some of the other romances that bloomed when the mob met Hollywood.
And the first one that we're going to talk about is Jean Harlow and Abner Longy Zwillman. What a name.
I love it.
During a personal appearance tour in Chicago in 1930, blonde bombshell Jean Harlow met Abner Longy Zwillman, a Jewish bootlegger and gangster who was well known as the Al Capone of New Jersey. He was nicknamed Longy because of his height, which makes sense, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
Despite his violent tendencies, Zwillman was every bit the gentleman with the ladies, and the ladies loved him. Jean Harlow was intrigued by his assured confidence and the power that he wielded. A romance bloomed, and Zwillman even stepped in to help Jean Harlow's stagnant career. She had become tired of the unexciting and similar roles she was being offered in Hollywood, and when she complained to Zwillman about it, he took action.
I love that. Zwillman approached Columbia Pictures mogul Harry Cohn and offered to loan him $500,000 if Cohn would give Harlow a 2-picture deal. Well, the 2 pictures turned out to be Platinum Blonde, 1931, and Three Wise Girls, 1932, and they not only gave her career a major boost, but they also helped create the screen persona that would really define Harlow's image. Mm-hmm. Like some actresses received candy or flowers. Harlow got a 2-picture deal from her paramour, so I think she wins on that one.
Yep.
Now, Harlow was no stranger to being a gangster's moll, at least in the movies. She was cast as gangsters' girlfriends in a number of movies, such as Public Enemy, 1931, and she would go on to help create the flashy, hard-edged image that moviegoers had come to expect of their gangster molls in the 1930s, and this was one that would become a long-lasting stereotype. Following her relationship with Zwillman, she married producer Paul Byrne in 1932, but after only 2 months of marriage, he mysteriously committed suicide, which some people don't think maybe was a suicide, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yes. Let's jump into Johnny Roselli and his many ladies.
Johnny Roselli got around.
Yep. One of the most notorious bad boys of the crime syndicate who mingled among studio heads, executives, directors, and movie stars was Johnny Roselli. Roselli was born as Filippo Sacco in Italy, and he moved to Boston as a kid. After a narcotics charge in Massachusetts, he fled the law to Chicago, where he reinvented himself with a new name. Gone was Filippo Sacco, and born was Johnny Roselli. In Chicago, he was recruited by Al Capone Cohen to become part of his organization and one of his last proteges. Roselli's first assignment was to monitor Capone's investments and coordinate communication between the Chicago and Los Angeles organizations. At the time, the Los Angeles branch of the Mafia was headed up by Joseph Artizzone, and Roselli worked closely with Artizzone's underboss, Jack Dragna.
Now, during his time in Hollywood, Roselli, who'd become known as Handsome Johnny because of his charisma and his movie star good looks, well, he became acquainted with several high-powered players in the film business, most notably Columbia Pictures head Harry Cohn, actor Robert Cummings, and producer Brian Foy, who had started out as a producer in B-movies at Warner Brothers. Now, Roselli loved all the fringe benefits of Hollywood, including the bevy of beautiful women who flocked there every year to become movie stars. One of Roselli's first high-profile Hollywood conquests was movie star Jean Harlow, who we just talked about.
We're connecting some dots here.
Yeah, Jean liked bad boys. Roselli met Harlow through her then boyfriend, who we just mentioned, Abner Zwillman. And Zwillman actually hired Johnny Roselli to keep an eye on Jean Harlow when he was out of town. Well, isn't this kind of like the wolf being hired to guard the hen house?
Yeah, I think so. Yikes.
Well, it didn't take long before Harlow and Roselli were involved in this hot, steamy affair for a few months, but it ultimately ended when Harlow became involved with MGM executive Paul Byrne. And of course, there are those who think he didn't commit suicide at all, but that Byrne had been rubbed out by Harlow's vengeful ex, Longy Zwillman.
Well, the next notch on Roselli's bedpost was the wild and randy actress and Ziegfeld's folly dancer, Lena Basquette. Basquette, whose half-sister was future dancing star Marge Champion, was this avant-garde character who turned up her nose at traditional convention, and she often found herself dancing right at the edge of the decadent and dangerous underbelly of Hollywood. In fact, she was a film favorite of Adolf Hitler.
Go figure.
Yeah, he used to write her dirty love letters.
You love to read those letters.
No, actually, I would not. I would really not.
Oh, I would totally want to read them. What's kinky to him?
Gosh. Well, Lena Basquette's first marriage was to Sam Warner, one of the Warner brothers. And after Warner died suddenly at the age of 40, the powerful Warner family took Lena to court to gain custody of the daughter that was between them, Lida. So in court, the Warners were able to prove Lena to be an unfit mother, so she lost custody of the daughter. And then she was basically blacklisted in Hollywood and lost her career. Her fourth marriage, so she had two others in between Warner. Her fourth marriage was to celebrated boxing trainer Teddy Hayes, who was known as the man who taught Jack Dempsey how to fight. However, Hayes and Dempsey had a major falling out and became mortal enemies.
Basquette's marriage to Hayes was volatile at best. She once described it, and this is a quote, volatile fighting followed by volatile sex, followed by volatile fighting, followed by volatile sex.
Wow. Yikes.
Now, when she discovered that Hayes was a bigamist and had another wife back in New Jersey, she sought revenge by instigating an affair with his sworn enemy, Jack Dempsey. Well, Hayes, who was friends with Roselli, had Roselli call up Lena and subtly suggest that someone just might get hurt if she didn't return to him. Well, Basquette was kind of tantalized, and she found it really romantic that Hayes loved her so much that he'd gotten this notorious Al Capone hitman to call her up, which is so funny to me. Well, it worked, and she soon reconciled with Hayes.
Wow. Well, when she finally met Johnny Roselli in person, she said about him, quote, "He was nothing like I imagined. He was handsome and dressed with exceptional good taste. He was magnetic. His unsmiling, chrome-colored eyes bore into me. His eyes, half closed, unblinking, were the coldest I had ever seen. For a moment, I couldn't form a single syllable. The lining of my stomach tightened." Yikes.
Wow, what a first impression.
Well, and true to form, Lena, who loved her bad boys, was smitten, and she and Roselli began a clandestine affair behind Teddy Hayes' back. However, Basquette grew tired of being a gangster's moll, and she ended things with Roselli. She later moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where she became, I bet you can't even guess, a world-class breeder of Great Danes.
Well, what happens to all the great gangsters' malls? They become breeders of Great Danes.
Yes, go figure.
Go figure. In 1937, Billy Wilkerson, who we've talked about on this show, who was the owner of the Hollywood Reporter, he had deep ties to the mob, as we all know, and he introduced introduced Roselli to Morajan Stevic, a madcap Chicago newspaper heiress who was eager to rebel against her wealthy upbringing and seek adventure and romance with a bad boy, and she found one. After a hot and heavy courtship, Roselli chartered a private jet and they flew to Mexico, where they impulsively got married.
Wow.
So after consummating the marriage, they quickly had their marriage annulled. So I think basically if he wanted to have relations with her,
I see. She had to be married.
it had to be legal, and so
Okay.
she made him marry her,
All
which is
right.
very funny. So he married her,
And then they got an
consummated,
annulment.
and got an
Okay.
annulment. Despite the annulment, they stayed together until Stevic's high-powered father, newspaper owner David Stevic, summoned her back to Chicago, where he had her committed to a psychiatric hospital where she underwent some pretty drastic Francis Farmer-like procedures, including electroshock therapy. The next year, Roselli fell hard for film actress June Lang. Now, June Lang, who, like my lovely co-host Nan, was a gorgeous blonde from Minnesota.
Aw, thanks.
Her screen image was that of the innocent girl next door.
Also just like me, right?
Just like you. She started out in bit parts, and she soon began moving her way up the cast list. And, she starred in some pretty decent movies. She supported Laurel and Hardy in Bonnie Scotland in 1935. She played Shirley Temple's teacher in Captain January, 1936, as well as her mother in Wee Willie Winkie, 1937. She also played the woman who comes between Frederick March and Warner Baxter in The Road to Home, 1936. And she played a convict who torments poor Rochelle Hudson in the women's prison film Convicted Woman, 1940.
Well, Lang met Roselli a few years after her divorce from the high-powered talent agent Victor Orsatti. The attraction was immediate, and soon the beautiful actress and the dapper mobster were seen all around Hollywood at the best restaurants and swanky nightclubs and movie premieres. Well, on a whim, the couple drove out to Palm Springs and then on to Yuma, Arizona, where they woke up a justice of the peace at 5 a.m., and on April 1st, 1940, they got married.
Which I always find that funny. They got married on April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
Was that purposeful?
I wonder. Well, singer Tony Martin, who was Lang's co-star in Alibaba Goes to Town in 1937, once said, "She was terrific, talented, a gorgeous girl, lots of fun. We had a great time on the picture. I don't know why she didn't go on to bigger things. Whether being John's girl hurt her chances, I don't know. I don't think it helped."
Not long after Lang and Roselli returned to Los Angeles from their honeymoon at the Grand Canyon, the romance was over. They were soon fighting like cats and dogs over Roselli's shady business dealings that took him away for weeks at a time without explanation. June began to sense that her second marriage was no less a mistake than her first, and after about a year and a few months, she moved out. In January of 42, she filed for divorce, citing extreme cruelty as the cause, and their final divorce decree was issued on March 1st, 1943.
Well, after a stint in the Army and a stint in jail for racketeering, Roselli returned to Hollywood. His friend, producer Brian Foy, who was the oldest sibling of the Seven Little Foys acting family, got him work as a producer at the newly established Eagle Lion studio. Roselli took to producing like a fish to water, and his appetite for beautiful actresses was as voracious as ever. So during this time, he dated, get this, Betty Hutton, Lana Turner, and even Donna Reed. Yes, Donna Reed was a gangster's mall. No, not really. But she dated him.
I know. I wonder if she knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first movie that Roselli produced was not surprising. It was a realistic gangster film called Canyon City from 1948, which starred Scott Brady, who we've talked about on the show. He followed that up with a film noir, He Walked by Night, also 1948, once again starring Scott Brady, along with Richard Basehart and Jack Webb. However, his producing career was cut short when Brian Foy left Eagle Lion and went back to Warner Brothers. Roselli continued to date and have sexual dalliances with actresses including Jean Carmen and, reportedly, Marilyn Monroe.
Well, during the 50s, Roselli moved his operation to Vegas, where he represented the Chicago mob's interest in the casinos. In the 1960s, Roselli was allegedly approached by the CIA to help with the assassination of Fidel Castro, Cuba's dictator. He later said that he and some of the mobsters who had been recruited to kill Castro were turned by the Cuban leader, and they became involved with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
I know. Just so many questions.
I know. So many questions.
Roselli, he even claimed to have fired shots at Kennedy.
Wow.
Which none of it's been proven, but it certainly makes you wonder about the whole grassy knoll controversy. Was there one shooter more? On April 23rd, 1976, Roselli was called before a Senate committee to testify about the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. 3 months after his first round of testimony on the Kennedy assassination, the committee wanted to recall him. However, at this point, he had gone missing since July 28th. And on August 3rd, Tennessee Senator Howard Baker, who was a member of the commission, requested that the FBI investigate Roselli's disappearance. 10 days after his disappearance, his decomposing body was found by a fisherman in a 55-gallon steel drum floating in Dumfoundling Bay near Miami. So he never got to finish that testimony. So we'll never know what else he had to share.
So creepy.
So creepy.
The next couple we want to talk about involves Phyllis McGuire, who was the lead singer of the McGuire sisters singing group. In case you don't remember them, they were a precursor to the Lennon sisters. They were a trio of perky, pretty ministers' daughters from small-town Ohio, who besides Phyllis included Dorothy and Christine. And they were this wholesome sister act whose straight-laced image was rocked when Phyllis began dating ruthless and notorious Chicago mafia boss Sam Giancana.
Now, Giancana first saw McGuire singing with her sisters at the Desert Inn in Las Vegas in 1959. At the time, the McGuire sisters were a headliner, pulling in $30,000 a week. Giancana, who was a 52-year-old widower at the time, was quickly smitten with the 29-year-old divorced blonde beauty. He found an in with her when he discovered that Phyllis liked to gamble.
Okay.
And Phyllis was in debt to the casino a lot.
Oh, wow.
So he arranged for her rather large gambling debt just to be erased by the casino, which was the kind of power he held within the Vegas casino world back then. He followed this up by sending her flowers. Now, McGuire, who claimed later that she did not know his notorious reputation at the time they first met, she was charmed by the sweet gesture, and they soon fell in love.
A sweet gesture, getting rid of your whole debt. Yeah, that's a sweet gesture.
Again, some people get flowers and candy. Some people get their gambling debts erased.
Right. Well, Phyllis's sisters and her conservative parents were not too happy about the relationship, and the bad publicity of their romance damaged the image of the group. Phyllis was pretty conflicted about it. Besides taking a toll on her professional life, McGuire was also caught up in an FBI investigation targeting Giancana's criminal activities. Her home was even bugged with listening devices, and we'll have more of that later, planted by the FBI. The couple was together for a number of years, but eventually the scrutiny just became too much for Phyllis, and she ended the relationship. However, they did remain good friends. McGuire eventually became involved with oil man Edward Tiger Mike Davis, but Giancana did not find love again, and he was shot to death in his Chicago home by an unknown assailant in 1975.
When Giancana was murdered, his mob friends and his showbiz friends, they kind of snubbed his funeral. Nobody showed up except for Phyllis McGuire and singer Keely Smith. They were the only two people of note to show to pay their respects to Giancana and his three daughters. In a Vanity Fair article by celebrity journalist Dominic Dunn, McGuire said, quote, "Sam was the greatest teacher I could ever have. He was so wise about so many things. Sam is always depicted as unattractive. He wasn't. He was a very nice-looking man. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drive a pink Cadillac like they used to say. He was a beautiful dresser. The two great losses of my life were my father and Sam."
Well, that says a lot right there.
It does.
Well, before we get to Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, Lana Turner, let's share with our listeners this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the pop quiz question, it actually is about Giancana and Phyllis McGuire and their passionate relationship. It was actually depicted in a 1995 HBO movie, and it's a really good movie called Sugar Time. Who played them in the movie?
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, we'll be right back with that and more actresses who dated the mob after this.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Mickey Cohen was a dominant Los Angeles mob boss in the 1940s and 50s. He famously bridged the gap between the criminal underworld and Hollywood's elite. He controlled rackets, he mingled with A-list movie stars, cultivated a celebrity image as a stylish philanthropic gentleman. He was originally a bodyguard for mobster Bugsy Siegel, played in the 1991 film Bugsy by Warren Beatty. In that movie, Cohen was played to the hilt by Harvey Keitel. In real life, Cohen took over as the West Coast crime boss after Siegel's murder in 1947, and Cohen quickly fell in love with Hollywood. He was considered a high-profile Hollywood hood who sought acceptance among movie stars, studio chiefs, and moguls while profiting from their vices. He was known for his expensive wardrobe and for mixing with actors, politicians, and newspaper editors. And get this, Cohen even hired a tutor to improve his manners and speech to better fit into Beverly Hills high society. He ran gambling rackets, high-class prostitution, labor union extortion, and he did all of this in plain sight, running things out of a haberdashery on Santa Monica Boulevard. He survived multiple assassination attempts, including shootings at his office and restaurant on the Sunset Strip. His reign ended when he was convicted of income tax evasion in 1951, serving time in federal prison, and then again in 1961, convicted of tax evasion, sent to Alcatraz. He was the only prisoner ever bailed out of Alcatraz. He died in 1976 of cancer and is buried at Hillside Memorial Park Cemetery in Culver City, California. And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody, and we're having a really fun talk about mobsters and starlets when the mob meets Hollywood. But before we get further into it and we talk about Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield and some other great actresses who dated mobsters, we're going to give a shout out to our listener of the week. And this week we are honoring John Ali, who has been so supportive. He always likes and he always shares, he always comments. We really appreciate all of your support, John.
And he's a great writer, musician, and actor as well.
Very nice.
Yeah, so thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Well, let's talk about Sonny Franzese and Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield.
Oh, let's.
That's quite a trio. He emerged in the 1950s. His name is John Sonny Franzese, an Italian-born mobster who operated out of New York and New Jersey and was involved in the typical stuff, racketeering, fraud, loan sharking. He was part of the Colombo Mafia family. He was handsome and flashy, and he loved to mingle with celebrities. He was a regular at swank nightclubs like the Copacabana, where he befriended stars like Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr.
According to the 2022 book Sonny, the last of the old-time mafia bosses, one of Franzese's paramours was blonde bombshell Jane Mansfield. He first met her at the Latin Quarter, which was a Manhattan nightclub opened in 1942 by Lou Walters, who we all probably know as Barbara Walters' father. Mansfield was doing her nightclub act there, and so after the show, he asked her to join his table. She sat down, and according to the book, she began to flirt. Before long, he asked her, "Who's taking you home?" She looked at him and replied that her husband, Mickey Hargitay, who was 1955's Mr. Universe, would be taking her home. Well, to Sonny, that was like throwing down the gauntlet. I mean, he reportedly said, "If your husband comes here, I'm going to beat him up." She laughed and replied, "Do you know who my husband is?"
Good comeback.
Yeah, more posturing followed, and Jane tried to calm Sonny and telling him not to get too excited. Well, still, according to the book, she did go home with him that night to his hotel room.
Wow. Well, he did fancy himself quite the ladies' man, and no woman was off limits to him. He allegedly had sexual dalliances with Ava Gardner, who at the time was the girlfriend of his good friend Frank Sinatra, as well as Marilyn Monroe, who at the time had just divorced Yankee legend Joe DiMaggio, who still carried a torch for her. Well, Sonny met actress Marilyn Monroe at the Stork Club thanks to an introduction by fellow mobster Frank Costello. There was a mutual attraction and they soon began dating, and his fling with Marilyn led to an encounter that left Sonny deeply ashamed. According to the book, his account of what happened that evening was telling because he actually expressed remorse about it, which was something that most mobsters, and Sonny in particular, seldom did.
Yes. Well, it was May 19th, 1962, and you may remember that was the famous night when Marilyn Monroe slithered onto the stage at the Madison Square Garden in this skin-tight, rhinestone-studded dress, and she sang a sexy, breathy happy birthday to President John F. Kennedy during the Democratic fundraiser. Well, her very personal tribute to the president shocked many of the 15,000 people in the audience. But down in the darkened arena, a very different personal drama was playing out. DiMaggio, who by then was Marilyn Monroe's ex-husband, but who, as we mentioned, also carried a torch for her, he tried to confront Sonny about their affair. Now, according to Sonny, and this is a quote, "He was chasing me all over the place. He wanted to talk to me. I didn't want to talk to him. I was ashamed. What can I tell him? Your wife's a whore. You know what I mean? So I ran away. I wouldn't talk to the guy. I liked Joe DiMaggio. He was my hero." which is so interesting. Sonny was not ashamed of his many affairs and all the gangster stuff he does, his infidelities, but he was genuinely bothered that he had hurt a man he idolized.
Wow.
Even mobsters have a code of honor of sorts, I guess. Well, later he'd become convinced that his affair with Marilyn Monroe who was rumored to have been involved with not only John F. Kennedy, but also Kennedy's brother, U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. This was what brought the wrath of the U.S. government down on him.
And we'll talk more about that toward the end.
Yes.
Let's talk about arguably the most famous and maybe the most tragic romantic entanglement between a classic Hollywood star and a mobster. And that, of course, is Lana Turner and Johnny Stompanado.
Oh, yes.
We touched briefly on this relationship in episode 3. Remember that? Way back in the day.
A long time ago.
Web of Love episode. Here are the details. So Lana Turner was famously married 8 times to 7 men, twice to Stephen Crane, with whom she had her daughter, Cheryl. The press loved to portray Lana as easy, which was a label that followed her for most of her career. But as your fairy godmother, Anne Rutherford, what did she tell you?
Oh my God. She used to say that Lana did not believe in sex before marriage. So if you wanted to have sex with Lana, you had to marry Lana.
Yeah.
And she married a lot.
Well, her relationship with Johnny Stompanado did not end in marriage. It ended in death. So let's find out, who is this guy?
Johnny Stompanado was a former U.S. Marine who saw combat in the Pacific during World War II. After the war, he drifted west, and by the 1940s, the late 1940s, he had embedded himself into Los Angeles' underworld. By 1948, he was working as a bodyguard for Mickey Cohen, earning about $300 a week, which was excellent money at the time. Well, Cohen was credited by Meyer Lansky, who was another notorious mob figure, with helping to engineer the original partnership between the Teamsters Union and the mob, and had the support of Charles Lucky Luciano to be the boss of the Los Angeles rackets. He was also friends with Frank Sinatra and helped finance a young Richard Nixon's congressional campaign.
Handsome, dark-haired, and smooth, Stompanado used aliases like John Valentine and John Steele. He had a reputation as an extortionist and a womanizer, and although he'd had multiple run-ins with the law, he had never served time. He'd been married and divorced 3 times, had a young son, and cycled through some respectable-sounding businesses, car sales, a pet shop, a furniture store, but most of his income came from wealthy women. One actress famously described him as a great lover, which tells you just how carefully he cultivated his image in Hollywood.
When Lana Turner met Stompanado in 1957, she was at a real turning point in her career. Her MGM contract had just ended, she'd gone independent, she'd sold her mansion, and she was struggling under the weight of enormous tax debt. Now, that summer, she was offered the role that would revive her career, Peyton Place. Around that time, a man calling himself John Steele began phoning her. He sent her flowers and records and gifts, and Lana later wrote in her autobiography, quote, "How did he know what music to send me? He knew how to get things done. His cunning at finding things out about me should have made me cautious."
Well, they began a passionate affair just before she left to film Peyton Place in 1957. Their meetings were always in her apartment, and at first, he was attentive and gentle, and he was kind to Lana's daughter, Cheryl. He took her on drives in his Thunderbird and told her, "I really care for your mother." Well, Cheryl later wrote in her 1988 memoir that with his dark looks and watchful eyes, it was not hard to see the hold that he had over restless women. But his life just didn't add up. At this point, they have no idea he's a part of the mob.
Yeah. Well, one of the red flags, Cheryl worked briefly at this small Westwood gift shop, which Johnny claimed was his livelihood. Well, the shop was really unimpressive, and Johnny spent most of his time in the back room speaking in low tones on the phone. Men came, men went. Cheryl was sometimes asked to mail packages that she suspected contained something other than pottery, so maybe a front for something.
Well, eventually, a friend told Lana the truth that John Steele, the name he was using with her, was actually Johnny Stompanado, an associate of Mickey Cohen. When Lana confronted Johnny, he shrugged it off. He said, "So, my name is Johnny Stompanado, so what?" And when she tried to break it off, he laughed. Quote, "Lana, darling, just try and get away from me." Yikes, that's when things turned dangerous.
Yes. Johnny began showing up at her house, uninvited, and once he slipped into her apartment and tried to smother her with a pillow. That should have been red flag number 1.
Yeah.
Yet when you try to kill me with a pillow, we're breaking up.
Yeah.
Well, Lana later admitted that although she threatened to go to the police, she never seriously considered it, partly out of fear, partly out of concern for her reputation, and partly because his obsessive passion was disturbingly exciting to her.
In late 1957, Lana left for London to film Another Time, Another Place, which came out in 58, with Barry Sullivan, Glynis Johns, and Sean Connery. Well, Johnny Stompanado followed her. In London, the relationship between Lana and Johnny spiraled. He beat her, he threatened her with a razor, and finally, he appeared on set with a gun. Sean Connery, still then early in his career, punched Stompanado and disarmed him.
Don't mess with James Bond.
No, you don't. British authorities promptly expelled Johnny from the country, but even then, Lana could not fully break free.
They actually reunited,
I don't even
if you can
get it.
believe it. I know. And of course, it wasn't long before the fighting resumed. He nearly strangled her. He damaged her vocal cords so badly that the production had to claim that she had laryngitis while she filmed silent scenes. Eventually, she went to Scotland Yard and had him deported. In early 1958, Lana was nominated for an Academy Award for Peyton Place, which was a real career high point for her. But Johnny insinuated himself back into her life. He insisted on accompanying her everywhere.
On the night of the Academy Awards, Lana did not invite Johnny. She went with her mother and Cheryl. Well, that night, after she returned home, having lost the Oscar to Joanne Woodward, Johnny was pissed off that he had not been invited, and he beat her brutally. And then a few days later, Lana and her 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl, moved into a rented mansion on North Bedford Drive. 9 days after the Oscar assault on Good Friday, April 4th, 1958, Johnny showed up again, and they started to argue.
At first, the argument stayed downstairs. Now, Cheryl at this point was upstairs trying to do homework, but she could still hear the raised voices. She leaned over the railing and called out to her mother, partly out of concern, but partly to make sure that Johnny knew she was in the house. The argument then moved upstairs into Lana's bedroom. Later, Cheryl would write in her memoir that Johnny was trembling with rage. His neck veins stood out. Lana was terrified, and she told Cheryl that she was afraid of him. She tried to disengage. She locked herself in the bedroom. Johnny forced his way inside. Lana begged him to leave. Johnny screamed that she would never escape him, that he would ruin her career, harm her family, destroy her life. Cheryl heard all of it.
Yeah, I mean, he threatened to cut her face, essentially.
Yeah.
So Cheryl runs downstairs. She grabs a carving knife from the kitchen. She runs back upstairs where the screaming continued. And according to Cheryl Crane, this is what happened next. Quote, "I picked the knife up off the floor. The door flew open. Mother stood there, her hand on the knob. He was coming at her from behind, his arm raised to strike. I took a step forward and lifted the weapon. He ran on the blade. It went in. For 3 ghastly heartbeats, our bodies fused. He looked straight at me, unblinking. My God, Cheryl, what have you done?" Within minutes, Johnny Stompanado was mortally wounded. Cheryl stabbed him once, fatally. She was 14 years old.
Wow. The coroner ruled the death justifiable homicide. Cheryl was never charged. The fact is often overshadowed by the spectacle of the story. And many people have questioned over the years if Cheryl was actually covering up for her mother. Cheryl Crane wrote in her 1988 memoir, and this is a quote, "Even to this day, when my mother and I refer to the tragedy in conversation, we euphemize it was the paragraph, because no press mention of us seems to be complete unless it includes a paragraph about what happened that Good Friday, 1958.
Yep, lots of questions. All right, last but not least, we have the beautiful and talented Marilyn Monroe, and we're back with Sam Giancana.
Again, Sam got around.
So it's the early 60s. Now, Marilyn Monroe is not just a movie star. She'd become an iconic sex symbol with failed marriages, as we mentioned, to Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller, who she divorced in early 1961. She was rumored, as we've discussed, to be having affairs with John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy. So that was the climate in which her name became linked to Sam Giancana, the powerful head of the Chicago outfit. So Giancana was under a lot of pressure from the Kennedy Justice Department. The FBI was watching him constantly, and he was openly furious with the Kennedys, especially JFK. In that atmosphere, stories started circulating connecting Hollywood, organized crime, and Washington power. As Steve mentioned, Giancana's longtime companion was singer Phyllis McGuire, who later told reporters that Giancana and JFK had both been involved with Marilyn.
Marilyn did move in circles where Giancana's name came up, largely through Frank Sinatra and the broader Rat Pack world. And she did travel to Lake Tahoe a few days before her death, where Giancana was present at the Cal Neville Lodge. That coincidence alone has fueled a lot of speculation over the decades.
But there's no solid evidence that Marilyn Monroe and Sam Giancana had a conventional romantic relationship, although is there anything conventional about dating a mobster?
Right.
There's just a lot of, they were in the same places, in the same circles, and the rumors, of course, followed.
Yeah. Well, after Marilyn's death, conspiracy theories started flying, and they're still around today. Some claim that Marilyn was going to tell all, not only about her affair with the Kennedys, but government secrets that had been told to her in private as well. Some say she had a diary that Robert Kennedy desperately wanted because of the secrets it held. Some say she might have had a miscarriage or abortion, having gotten pregnant by JFK. And because of all these rumors, many believe Marilyn was silenced. But none of that has ever been proven. The coroner ruled her death a probable suicide, and every alternative explanation remains exactly that, speculation.
So did she date Sam Giancana, have a one-night encounter? Did they know each other? We don't know. And we really will never know what happened to her. Many of the records from the case of her probable suicide have disappeared.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been... This is a dark one, this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Let's remind listeners of this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the pop quiz question was, Giancana and Phyllis McGuire, they were actually depicted in the 1995 HBO movie Sugar Time. Which actors played them?
I have no idea.
And to me, it's weird casting.
Yes.
It was John Turturro and Mary Louise Parker.
Okay, do not see that at all.
I kind of get John Turturro a little bit.
Does he look like?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. But
Okay.
Mary Louise Parker, I don't get her at all as Phyllis McGuire.
No.
But that's just me.
Well, thanks everyone for spending this time with us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. And we would also love it if you watch the YouTube version of this podcast. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe.
And we love your emails. Please keep them coming. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2026, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.